The equator. The equator is the imaginary line on the Earth's surface that is equidistant from the two poles of the Earth, thus dividing the planet into the northern and the southern hemispheres. The length of the equator is about 40,000 kilometers, of which 78.7% of the imaginary line passes through water and the rest through land. And so we got ourselves 8,520 full kilometers divided into exactly 11 countries. But first, what is the equator? And why and how did the term exist? The equator, also known as latitude 0 degrees, is one of the 5 most significant latitudes on Earth, along with the Arctic Circle, Antarctic Circle, Tropic of Cancer, and Tropic of Capricorn, which are used to indicate where countries and other locations on the world are in relation to one another. The equator passes through 11 countries and traverses the territories of 2 island nations, but does not make landfall in either. Indonesia is a country spread across both land and sea and has the greatest length of the equatorial line. The other countries on the equator are Ecuador, Brazil, Colombia, Sao Tome and Principe, Gabon, Republic of the Congo, Maldives, Uganda, Kenya, Somalia, and Kiribati. Tropical rainforest or equatorial climates are typical of the nations that are on the equator. Seasonal variations are typically non-existent. However, in other locations, cold currents bring about tropical monsoon climates with a dry season. The equatorial regions often have daytime temperatures of roughly 30 degrees Celsius. The annual average rainfall is relatively high, ranging from 2,500 to 3,500 millimeters. At a height of 4,690 meters, Ecuador's Volcan Cayambe's southern slopes are home to the equator's highest point. Only here on the equator is snow actually found on the ground. The only nation in the world with a name derived from a geographical feature is also Ecuador. República del Ecuador is the country's full name in English, and it translates to the Republic of the Equator. And so Ecuador is a really interesting equator country. Its name is the same, and besides that, it's the only place that's receiving any snow. How cool is that? Other high-altitude peaks like Mount Kilimanjaro and Andes have glaciers. Countries along the equator, such as Indonesia, Congo, and Brazil, host more than half of the global rainforest. On the equator, there are several big cities, with the biggest being Bogotá in Colombia. With a population of about 8.1 million, Bogotá is both Colombia's largest city and its capital. At 4 degrees 35'53" north, on the southeast corner of the Bogotá savanna, it's also the biggest city on or close to the equator. The city has a subtropical climate, which is typically not what one would anticipate from an equatorial city. The elevation above sea level, 8,660 feet, is the cause of the area's cold and fresh climate. As a result, unlike most cities and countries, they don't really have seasons there. The average temperature is 13 to 15 degrees Celsius all year long. Most other countries around the equator also don't have seasons. However, these countries have a temperature of mostly between 23 and 30 degrees Celsius. One of the most well-known towns in the world's equatorial region is Quito, the capital of Ecuador. And not because it's the biggest or anything, rather it's close to the equator parallel, being just 1 kilometer away. Even the name of the state is derived from the equator. At the equator, the Earth's magnetic field is weaker. It's strongest at the poles because they're vertical. At the equator, the Earth bulges slightly, and its diameter along this imaginary line is approximately 43 kilometers bigger than at the poles. The equatorial bulge means that people standing at sea level near the poles are closer to the center of Earth than people standing at sea level near the equator. The equatorial bulge affects the ocean too. Sea levels are slightly higher in equatorial regions than near the poles. This simply means the Earth is not round, as many think. The equatorial bulge of the Earth causes its gravitational attraction to be slightly less strong there. And so the gravitational force and momentum of the Earth's rotation are slightly weaker in equatorial latitudes, making them the best locations for space launches. A satellite or other spacecraft must be launched out of the Earth's atmosphere using a tremendous amount of energy. In reduced gravity, launching a rocket requires less energy, rocket fuel. The U.S. launches most spacecraft from the Kennedy Space Center in southern Florida, which is closest to the equator. Other rocket launching facilities near the equator include Shaba North, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Gan Island, Maldives. Lines above the equator in the northern hemisphere are known as north latitude, whereas lines below the equator in the southern hemisphere are known as south latitude. The equator is halfway between the north and south poles. The equator is approximately 6,215 miles, 10,002 kilometers from either the north or south pole. The lengths of night and day are roughly equal, and the amount of daylight is consistent throughout the year. Nighttime is around 14 minutes shorter than daytime. Sunrises and sunsets are shortest near the equator, and the sun's typical orientation is nearly perpendicular to the horizon for much of the year. Natural biodiversity is higher towards the equator due to the warm environment, which allows species to develop continually. Did you know that twice a year during the spring and autumn equinoxes, the sun passes directly over the equator? Many equatorial countries vary between the rainy and dry seasons. Most of the year is frequently covered by the wet or rainy season. Tropical rainforests are a result of the extended warm wet season. The Amazon rainforest in South America, the Congo rainforest in Central Africa, and the diverse Southeast Asian rainforest that stretches from India to Vietnam are some of the largest rainforests in the world. All three are located in tropical regions. Even though they're among the closest to the sun, tropical regions are not the warmest in the globe due to the presence of humidity. The air in the equatorial regions is slightly cooled by water. Did you know that equatorial regions are not always the world's hottest? Or did you think these are simply the hottest places to live? In fact, there's no territory of the 11 equator countries that's considered in the top 10 hottest nations. The 10 hottest countries are Gambia, Qatar, Palau, Iran, Mauritania, Djibouti, Tuvalu, Senegal, Burkina Faso, and at the first place, Mali, with an average temperature of 28.83 degrees Celsius between 1991 and 2020. Warm equatorial climates support a variety of cultures. Successful farmers like the Fang people of Gabon, for example, grow crops like corn, yams, and plantains because of the country's mild climate and protracted rainy season. Goats and chicks are only two examples of the livestock that the Fang raise. Another equatorial region without the hot, muggy weather frequently associated with the equator is the Andes. The mountain range has some of the highest peaks on Earth, as well as a desert with almost no rain, the Atacama. In equatorial climates, a wide variety of plant and animal species thrive. For instance, the ecosystems of the Amazon and Congo rainforests are incredibly diverse. In Brazil, a single hectare, 2.47 acres of rainforest, may have 750 different tree species and twice that many insect species. Elephants, lions, and cheetahs are among the species that inhabit Kenya's tropical savanna. Llamas, alpacas, visuas, and guacanos are some of the notable camelid species found in the frigid equatorial Andes. Many fleets incorporate the line crossing ceremony, which is commemorated when a sailor first crosses the equator. Those who have crossed the equator are known as shellbacks, or sons of Neptune, whereas those that have not are known as pollywogs. Pollywogs are frequently the object of humiliating and funny practical jokes. Now, we all know what the equator is. It's a line of latitude that divides the Earth into two equal hemispheres, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. But did you know that more than 90% of the population live north of this line? Or simply said, 90% lives above the equator, and so in the northern hemisphere. Although the equator is an imaginary line and simply made by human, it's a truly fascinating measurement of our globe and things and countries around it. Being stereotyped as hot, we've learned that it brings much more with it. Snow, species, biodiversity, interesting climate differences, and many amazing facts. The equator really deserved its own video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this instructive video. If you did, consider leaving a like and subscribe to the channel, as there's many more content coming your way. Anyway, thank you for watching, and as always, see you in the next of Earth Basics. Peace!